Hey everybody, this is Rick again, and I just wanted to share some more thoughts about the situation that happened with the Capitol last week, and following up on some of the dialogue that I had in my previous video about it. In that video, I talked about how we all feel exiled from ourselves and from one another, and how ultimately we're desiring wholeness. And I think that one of the problems, though, that comes up is there's still this justice issue. Like, what needs to be done about this? And, Trump has, about a week left or so in his presidency. And a lot of Republicans seem to be wanting us to just forgive him and pretend like it never really happened, it seems like. I'm not really seeing much of a consequence there. But then there's a lot of Democrats who are saying, he needs to have the 25th Amendment invoked, or he needs to be impeached again, or, he needs to face criminal charges. And there's this real question about justice and what is justice, what needs to happen here. And so it really reminds me of a situation when I go back to the Bible, and I look at how conservative evangelicals in particular see justice. So, if you think about leading up to the Trump years, during the Obama presidency, there was a number of things that happened that evangelicals were very upset about. So you had the contraception mandates, and then you also had the cake baking mandates, where they were being forced. Some of them were being forced to bake cakes for gay weddings, and that was something that evangelicals were very afraid of. And then there was also the transgender bathroom bill that came up, where they could use the restroom for their own gender identity. And then you had like the Target. I don't know if you remember, there was some Target came up with that, and was going to allow that, and so evangelicals were going against Target, and they were never going to go to Target. And then there was ultimately you had the gay marriage ruling the summer before Trump got elected, and that was just like the ultimate nightmare to conservative evangelicals. And so, especially with those particular issues, a lot of them are related to the LGBTQ community. For evangelicals, when they see that and they look at their Bible, they think about the stories of Sodom and Gomorrah, and you'll often hear them talk about Sodom and Gomorrah's main sin was homosexuality, and yet, and that God judged Sodom and Gomorrah with fire from heaven and everything. So if you go back to those actual stories, and you see what they actually say in Ezekiel 16, when the prophet is looking back on the story of Sodom, he actually doesn't say anything about that. Instead, he says that the sin of Sodom was pride, was excess of food, was prosperous ease, and it was not aiding the poor and the needy. And so if you think about those particular list of things, quite honestly, it really fits a lot of evangelicalism and a lot of conservative positions. You look at Trump, he embodies pride. He embodies just wanting to have prosperous ease and excess. And you've got these capitalistic tendencies there that were just about more and more and more, and doing whatever you can to acquire more, and don't ever say anything negative about those at the top, with the income inequality, because that's class warfare, and so we can't say anything about that. And then not aiding the poor and needy. I mean, we demonize people who need government assistance. They need help. We don't really help them with our churches that much at a very systemic level. And then whenever someone from the government says, okay, let's put together this program to help them, conservatives will demonize them. And so really, if we're honest with ourselves, I think conservative evangelicalism very much fits the bill of Sodom, far more than the LGBTQ community ever could. So the question then is what happens there. In Jeremiah 49 and 50, it talks about how Sodom has become a wasteland, and it is its judgment is final. Its judgment is forever. It's a no one will ever settle there. And so you've got this like eternal judgment language going on there. Zephaniah 2 talks about how it's a salt pit forever and a wasteland forever. I mean, you can't get much more stark than that. It sounds like, this is why the Sodom and Gomorrah is often used as an image of the lake of fire in the traditional, the Christian, conservative evangelical view that of eternal lake of fire as God's ultimate final judgment. And yet, in Ezekiel 16, it says that Sodom will be restored. So you've got this view of it being a salt pit and a waste forever, and yet you've also has this view of it being restored. Well, how is that possible? Like, you've got these two competing visions here for what justice ultimately is. And so I think really when we look at this situation, there needs to be some kind of consequences. We can't simply say, we'll just forgive and forget and just pursue unity and pretend like Trump's policies have done nothing to hurt the poor, and Trump's policies has done nothing to incite violence, really. He's only got a week left. Let's pretend like nothing ever happened. Like, no, that's not justice. But on the other hand, we're not going to leave. I think conservative evangelicals have this idea that if it's not that, then it's set them on fire forever. Eternal conscious torment. I'm like, okay, like I get how you would come up with that vision from some of these texts, as a salt pit and a wasteland forever being justice, but that doesn't take in my gut. In all honesty, my gut wants to just, say to hell with all this stuff. With conservative evangelicalism, with Trump politics, I have no interest in going back to that at all. I have no interest in really trying to work through and reach out and have unity with people who are just, so mean and nasty. And yet there's this vision of no matter how dead and how destroyed and how hopeless this is, and how much it's been decreed over it that no one will ever settle here, there's still this seed of hope for restoration. And so that's where I think we need to ultimately get to. If we're gonna have a posture of wholeness and see the universe as wholeness, then we need to have not a retributive view of justice that simply wants to pay back and get even, and because that doesn't make anything right. We need to have a restorative view of justice that actually sets things right again. And so that's ultimately a much harder view of justice, and it's a much more difficult thing for us to be willing to enter into. But ultimately, that's the hard work that we need to do in American politics. It's the hard work that we need to do in ourselves, both individually and at a societal, systemic level, is to pursue wholeness, but do so through a restorative justice that deals with the very stark realities of how we have treated people and how we have treated the poor and needy and those who do not have excess and those who do not have the prosperous ease that so many of us have. And then through repentance and through reparations can make things right again.